welcome to another edition of MLB Pro Happy Hour, 3 slurred minutes edition. We got a little bit of this, a little bit of that to cover. Joined tonight by a cast of characters. We have Brenton, we have Scott, we have Jim, and we have myself, the anonymous GM. We have quite a bit to cover. I've been given some topics. Brenton has been given some topics. We have a flurry of trades to go over. I'm going to hand things off and let you take charge of tonight's show. So what's on your mind? What do we need to talk about tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing we wanted to get into, we have a very rare opportunity where both GMs are here to discuss one of the larger trades made over the last month or so. And that's a guy like Allard, who has largely been untouchable for the, 3 years he's been in the majors. Suddenly thrown onto the block a couple weeks ago and finally dealt here. Not only dealt, but dealt in division. So, well, not in division, in league, I guess, right? So I wanted to open that up. I figured we could explain both our sides of what we're doing here, right? At least one rebuilding team seemingly buying from a not rebuilding team is not a normal situation. So I'd love to get a little bit of conversation there, get some anonymous takes on it. I know you had some people give you some stuff, and then get Jim's take on the situation, and Sam, if he's willing to jump in here.
So let's start with this. The trade itself. Allard going from Cincinnati to Atlanta. Atlanta sending 4 prospects. Brennan Malone, starting pitcher. Matthew Thompson, starting pitcher. Royce Lewis, third base. Fernando Luguzamo, shortstop. So 4 prospects, all highly thought of, from Atlanta to Cincy, the 22-year-old Allard to Atlanta. So let's I guess start. I'm staring at you, so let's start with this. Why did the Braves do this trade? A team that's been in rebuild mode. Trevor Bauer sent out a month ago. Armando Cabanas and all that stuff last year, seemingly looking towards the future. You've been accumulating all these prospects. Why the sudden desire to move some of those highly touted prospects for a young starting pitcher?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was a move where I went out and made. I think if you think about this as me acquiring Trevor Bauer, it makes less sense. But Allard being a guy who is 22 years old and has multiple years of control left, it still fits my competition timeline. I still think that this is a move that keeps me on the rebuild. You know, you deal guys like Matt Thompson, who I like Matt Thompson, but I actually got him in that coin flip deal. If y'all remember the dice roll trade with the Mariners where we rolled the dice and I got him for Casey Kelly. He's a guy that never should have been on my team anyway, right? So Matt Thompson was sort of like a toss-in piece for me. Not that he's not talented. The dude's very, very talented. Like, he never should have been in Atlanta. Brennan Malone was part of the deal with Chicago that brought back, I think, Cal Cody out. So, like, he was, you look at it, there's a bunch of really, really good pieces, but I just need one. I already have Aiken and Tate. I like Porter Coran. I really like Robinson Rivera. I need one very good pitcher. And so dealing 4 pieces that all have great potential, but have people that I've already got their equal on the team, I thought of it as a place I could overpay for a MLB piece and get the guy I really wanted and not take the chance, right? And for Scott's side, like, I'll let him explain it, but to me, it makes total sense from his side as well. So,
Scott, here we were in Cincinnati at the start of the year, a team that I think many expected to compete for the NL Central title. It's been another slow start, a disappointing start. But when May started, I think there was still hope. There was still a belief from within that this team could win the division. 2 weeks later, it seems that mindset either changed or just a new direction was wanted to be taken. What from your standpoint changed? And when it was determined that you were going to move Colby Allard, how did that process go? And as in terms of the 4 players you got, what's their future outlook in Cincinnati look like?
Well, at the beginning of May, I didn't really expect to even think about trading Colby, but Brenton came to me and said, "Hey, I'm willing to offer," and he listed some people, and I went, "Oh, now you're going to make me think about this." And we went back and forth for a while, and then another team jumped in and gave a good offer. And so the holdup for a few days there was Royce Lewis. Brenton didn't want to part with him.
Yeah.
And when I got the other offer, I pretty much came back to him and said, this is the deal that I would take, not expecting him to accept it. So I made the
Jim,
same thing.
so no, go ahead, Scott. Go ahead.
Oh, and I made a similar offer to the second team that was involved and said, here's what it would take. And he held pat on what he was offering. And so I decided this team has been frustrating me for the last couple of years. And, if I'm going to try to go in a different direction, then I need to go in a different direction. And
So I'm hearing that I was the weaker link, is what you just basically said. Like the other team didn't bend, and I did. Is what I heard. So great, that's good to hear.
Well, I asked you if you were drinking before I made the offer, so that was a good. I'm just kidding.
Jim, as an outsider, I guess both when you saw the trade, what did you think of the trade, and just in general, how shocked were you that Allard got moved at all?
So there's a couple things here. One is I don't pay enough attention to actually be shocked by anything. But the thing that helps me in this deal is I've tried to trade with both of these teams this year. So I've actually gone through both their rosters, and I'm decently familiar with most of the pieces. The question I really had is like when this trade started, Brenton and Scott, is as a 15 for 19 player deal. How did you guys whittle it down to just this 4-for-1? I mean, was that a painstaking process to really bring it down from 33 total players to just those 5? Or do you feel like that was a smooth process?
It's interesting because of the new rule change, and I think I know I sort of caused that rule change, but I came to Scott as opposed to what I would have done maybe 5-6 weeks ago with like, hey, Scott, here's 40 players that are all decent, take all of them, and came to him with 4 guys off my top 100 list. Right, these guys that I came with they're talented teams. So we actually started with a 4-for-1 offer, and it never got any bigger than that. Weirdly enough, I know it's hard to believe, but that's where we started.
Yeah, and Brenton, from when we were talking and just chatting through our little minor deal with Buxton and Sharp, like I got pretty familiar with your top prospects, and the guys you moved were guys that I just quickly crossed off my list when I was going through and doing my trade with you, right? I'm like, not that guy, not that guy. So I wasn't super shocked when I saw the names that came through. I actually wasn't all that familiar with Allard, so I had to go back and look at his stats too.
When you say you crossed them off, you say you crossed them off because you didn't think I'd move them, or you just didn't like them? Which way were you?
Didn't think you'd move, right? We did such a minor deal that I wasn't going to come asking for those types of players, right? So I thought it was cool. And I actually had to go back myself and look at Allard and remind myself, because when Scott and I had talked trades, again, it was more minor deals, right? So I hadn't even looked at Allard as a potential candidate to be moved. I just knew he was a mainstay. But I get that at some point in time, like you just get bored with your team, right, Scott? Like a little bit, you just keep churning out the same result, and you're like, let's do this with new players. Like I think about that a lot of times, even just in like fantasy baseball too.
Eddie, welcome. I wanted to get Eddie's take, then we'll get back to you, Scott. Eddie,
no problem.
The trade, Cincinnati, Atlanta. What was your reaction when you saw that break the wire?
So I was a little torn because I think Scott's team has, like, you look at his roster, man, it's a talented roster. So I was a little bummed to see him, maybe throw in the towel a little bit early. But and when I looked at the guys he was getting, and I compared to like this, I was after Allard, but I was never going to be in contention for what he got. Like I think he got an awesome return. So, so I'm torn. I think it was a good deal. I think it was a good move for him, but I'm still a little torn. I think he's got a great roster that it's tough to see that being torn down.
Yeah, and me as a National League homer, I've talked about this a bunch of times. I was hesitant to go after him. I really was, because I don't think the Reds have a championship-winning roster. They're not going to beat the Angels, not going to beat the Mariners, but like I like their chances to compete in the National League and push the Cardinals to potentially make a move that they need to get better later on. And I think now, if the Reds fade back, the Cubs aren't a real team. The Pirates aren't a real team. The Cardinals are going to run away with this thing. I know you love the Jabs hate, but like the Cardinals are going to run away with this thing. And what pushes them to make a move to get better, to compete with an American League team? I don't know. Like Ryan has been a historically cautious. Now that's interesting to say a guy that acquired Longoria and Kershaw, but like he's been very careful with his moves. He's not going to go out and make the little splashes. He's going to make either one big move or nothing. So what pushes Brockman to compete with American League teams? I don't know. I think we're stuck with the Mets now getting Greg Bird, probably to upgrade their roster. It's the Mets and the Rockies, and that's the National League's only friggin' hope. And I don't know. I would like more chances.
Well, I wanted to, there were 3 other trades involving National League teams here in the last couple days. The first one with Eddie here, I think it's worth getting his opinion, both with the rivalry ending and within his division. That would be the Giants trying to jumpstart their slow start by acquiring Miguel Velasquez, a player that has a notorious reputation for being a flat-out locker room cancer, a player that has experience in the National League West with his time back in Arizona. Is this a move that's going to work for your brother and the Giants?
So, as someone who's competing with him, I love it because I think it will not be a good move. I think that contract, that locker room fit, you saw it first game, right? He was 3 for 3. Nobody else on the team hit. I think, Posey is a good locker room captain, and I don't know if he can bring him and keep the team aligned with him in. But, dude, at that age, that contract, that attitude, I think it's a bad move. On the other hand, though, I think Ryan has an aging roster. He does have a lot of talent, and if he's going to make the playoffs and make a push, it is the kind of move that could propel the team to rally around and do something. Like I think, it's the one thing he could do to maybe spark something, but I honestly think it's going to set his franchise back a couple years.
The other thing that I think could go under the radar with this trade is his outfield defense. Jimenez isn't a great outfielder. Bob Carlisle's a decent outfielder, but now having to play center field where he has his least amount of experience. And Velasquez is an average outfielder at best. It's an outfield defense that could take a hit and could backfire against a team that's built on their pitching. But does anyone else have a take on Miguel Velasquez to San Francisco?
So that's an interesting piece. Sorry, and we'll get to the take here. I just want to make sure. Adon, can you give away how long you've been in this league without giving away your identity?
I've been here long enough.
All right. So do you remember Dave and the literal years we spent debating whether defense mattered in this league or not? Like there were literally half a decade where this league had this ongoing argument whether defense mattered or not. Were you part of that?
Dave had first baseman playing shortstop. I mean, Dave was playing premium positions. At least this is a left fielder. Yeah. I will give that. So we're not talking premium position.
No, we're not. But it's interesting to think about like somebody who had a competitive team at a time where this league maybe didn't have the super teams that it's got now. There was no Angels. There were no Mariners at that time. But he had a competitive team with people playing well out of position. So the defensive thing, while interesting, and yeah, San Francisco's got an interesting outfield. Like it's got its own dimensions. It's got its own wind patterns. I don't know how much that plays into our game at all. Like that's an interesting piece. I think the bigger part of it is what Eddie just said. Like his team's old as shit. His best couple of players are like my age. That's not good. You don't want people my age starring for your team right now. It's not what you're looking for, right? So this is like his last shot. And it's kind of what I was talking about with Scott. We talked about that a couple of weeks before we traded Allard. The Giants and the Reds are in their twilight years. This is the last couple of years they compete. And the move he makes to push his team over the top is to go grab Miguel Velasquez. That's the move you're making, really. Like, I think this is a terrible decision. I'm with Eddie. I think this is going to be a total disaster. I think it's now it's Rockies, Mets, Diamondbacks in the National League. I wish Sam and the Dodgers could compete. I really do, but his team's too far back at this point. The Giants are irrelevant to me. Like, I'm done with them. That's a Stephen A. Smith take. I get it, but they're done. They're done.
Jim, I want your American League take then with this. If it didn't make sense for the Giants, well, did it make sense for the Yankees?
I honestly, all I knew about Velasquez when I saw his name come through was it had stuck in my mind all of those low traits, right, that come across the board with him. So while hearing you guys describe him as a cancer makes total sense. I didn't know much beyond that with him. So other than the fact that I knew he was, pushing like 30, 40, 50 home runs last year, every time we played him, he crushed one. So that's not really saying much against Detroit, but
yeah.
I mean, you gotta do something when you're in the middle, right? Like I feel like the Nationals are kind of in that boat too, but that's my not very informed take.
Well, then here, let's stay with you in your division and bring Scott back into this with another his most recent trade. His trade this afternoon of Craig Kimbrel and $1 million cash to the Chicago White Sox for a pair of prospects and Will Anderson and Stan Lee. It's the third late back end of the bullpen piece the White Sox have added here in about the last 10 days. It's a team that has had a very hot 10-game stretch or so, I believe winning 8 of 10 maybe. A team that has now rebounded right around 500. They trail the Indians by 5, 6, 7 games. The American League wild card race is going to be interesting because you have the Angels and Mariners probably going to both hit 100 wins, so that's going to take one of the spots. The Blue Jays, I think, are still a team that are going to win 90-plus games. It comes down to, do the Yankees, are they for real all season long? Or will Minnesota and Rocky find their groove and hit the 90-win mark? What did this move do for Chicago this season? Can the White Sox compete for a wild card spot or even the American League Central?
Man, I'm hoping for a wild card spot. I mean, I'm pulling for these guys. When they started pushing and poking for back-end bullpen help, both those guys in Seattle, we chatted very briefly because Detroit was trying to move a couple of those pieces too if we could improve elsewhere. I actually like the White Sox chances. I tend to see them as like a pretty scrappy team every time I play them. The Yankees are real hit and miss, at least the games that we've had against them. I feel like they're real boomer bust. So I like the White Sox as the more steady option there. I don't think they're going to catch the division win, but maybe sneak in at the end.
Scott, without giving away your other suitors, how active was the trade market for Craig Kimbrel?
I had 3 or 4 other teams asking about him, but when Hodges asked, I said, this is what it would take. And he said, let me sleep on it. And then this afternoon, he came back to me and said, deal. So I really like Will Anderson, good outfielder, I think, in the next year or so. And, Stan Lee was a guy who I traded a few years ago. And, I see him more as a setup/closer type in the future. Be nice if he developed a 4th pitch and became a starter, but I don't see that happening.
Then Brenton, you had a trade this afternoon as well, an interdivision trade. The New York Mets acquiring Greg Bird, a position of weakness with both Russell Martin and Travis d'Arnaud behind the plate already, both struggling, both veterans. Adding Greg Bird to a lineup that already has the likes of Elvis Andrus, Matt Dendecker, Marte, Will Cox, Wong Lewis. It's now a very deep lineup, a team that still has arguably the best pitchers in the National League, both on the mound in the rotation and in the bullpen. Are the Mets, I mean, I know we have Eddie on the call, and Arizona lurking out west as well, but does this move push the Mets and Bruce as the team to beat in the National League?
I still think the Rockies are the team to beat. The Mets are great. I mean, the Mets are one of those teams that they get more out of their players than anybody else. I never expect the players that are on their roster. Alberto Vega, John Lester, these guys, I don't think anything of them from their ratings and their history, but they're spectacular. They just produce year over year. Matt Dendecker, I forget the name of the fellow who is their other corner outfielder who almost won an MVP last year. I never heard of the guy, literally. Before
Josh Wilcox.
Yeah, Josh Wilcox. I never heard of the guy. It's just consistently the Mets are producing these kinds of players. So, I don't think that they're going to catch Eddie. I think that they're the 2 seed. Now, could they beat Eddie in a 4, 5, 6 game series? Yeah, their pitching is spectacular. Alberto Vega is virtually unhittable at times. So, the possibility is there. But I still think, even with the Bird acquisition, they've got one more piece to add. And I think it's on the offensive side of the ball. Maybe their pen's great. Their rotation's fine. They got one more offensive piece to add. I don't know what it is, but I think they have one more piece where they can catch with the Rockies. And that may be rose-colored glasses, but I love the Rockies lineup. And actually, I love the manager's name escapes me at the moment, but when I traded this is personal for me. I ended up trading Hideki Abe and a couple other guys to the Rockies, and then with the well-documented drunken offseason that led me to not re-sign the manager that brought me to the World Series, on accident. Yeah. Literally didn't realize his contract expired.
Dude, my three of the key guys, Abe, Dennis Moore, and Desi Wilson.
Desi.
we're going to thank our success to the Atlanta Braves.
The Desi Wilson thing kills me, man, because like we brought him in and he was one of the managers. Actually, Desi Wilson's the reason that managers that have that controlling style in this league no longer have full lineup control, because Matt let me undo it, right? And so that was the one thing against Desi, was that he wouldn't let you have lineup control. I signed him. Matt let me to undo it. I forgot he was on a 1-year contract or 2-year contract. He lapsed. I was not paying attention in the offseason. He walked, and he ended up signing with the fucking Rockies. And lo and behold, the Rockies are the best in the National League the next couple of years. It's unbelievable. Like, the most frustrating thing I've ever done in my entire life. But I still think because of that, great management, great offense. I love their staff, despite the fact that they're in the Coors Field. Like, I love the Rockies staff. The Rockies are to build. And you think about this, Eddie's one of the most active trade, at least asking on things, pieces out, like partners out there. Eddie's going to go buy something. You know he is. The Rockies are buying something before the deadline. What is it? I don't know. He's buying something. This team's getting better, and I think they're already the best team in the National League.
He's let's not forget before the end of May.
The offseason acquisition of American League MVP contender last season, Steve Winter. I'd say that's worked out for you so far this year.
Dude, I mean, that guy's been unreal. I thought, last year, I think McKinley hit like 360 something. And Winter's hitting better than that so far.
As of the other day, the 11th, I have Winter hitting 379 with an on-base percentage of just 436. So a guy that is living on base in front of the likes of Correa, McKinley, Peterson. All things are well in Colorado. First in batting average, first in on-base percentage, first in slugging, OPS, second in runs scored, first in hits. Basically every offensive category you could name, the Colorado Rockies lead it. There was one. Go ahead.
I was going to say the one thing that I think will come back to bite me, and it happened if you remember in the World Series, I think it was Game 7 or Game 6 where I had like 4 or 5 errors. My defense is still, it's like one of the worst in the National League. So that's the thing that's on my mind. Like, our defense has got some holes.
And to be fair, the Rockies were chasing Michael Sharp at one point. I do know that.
We have a team, or not a team, but a request to talk about a team tonight. It's a team that has slowly rebuilt themselves from – here, let me pull up their history before I speak outside my mouth. 2018, they won 61 games. 2019, they won 81 games. So a 20-win improvement for the Boston Red Sox from 18 to 19. 2020 has not gotten off to the start that Brett and those in the front office in Boston hoped for. What do we see with the Red Sox? What do we think they maybe should be doing? What's just our general vibe with the Boston Red Sox over in the American League East as John in Tampa Bay rebuild, as Drew in Baltimore continue to rebuild, and it's kind of a 2-horse race at the top currently with Mitch and Rhett in New York and Toronto. Where do the Red Sox fit in with all of this?
I mean, they're in that dreaded position of like being mid-tier, right? They are stuck between a rebuild, which I think they did really well. I love Todd Kuhn. I love Drew Lock's potential. He has definitely struggled at the major league level. They have a couple bats down that major. Scott, what's the guy's name that was a sticking point in your deal talk? What was that kid's name?
Starts with a P. Panetera?
He's like a 19-year-old international kid. The kid looks like Nomar Mazara without the fielding ability. The kid's bat is ridiculous, right? So they have these pieces that are like 19, 20 years old that'll be ready in 2 or 3 years. They've got Todd Kuhn, who's already up there. They've got like Ronald Stanton, a couple other pieces that I really like. George Springer has played fairly well out there. Boston's a team that's good enough to win 85, 87 games this year. Will they? No. Will they next year? Maybe. Is that going to mention what?
You missed Cleveland. Cleveland.
Oh yeah. So we have Cleveland's another piece, right? Like, but they're not going to compete with Toronto right now. And honestly, Toronto's one of those teams like you can't count them out of anything, right? Like their roster right now is spectacular. I mean, Mitch is liable to blow it all up tomorrow and then rebuild the next day. Like, you never know what's going to be in Toronto's lineup, but you can't count the Blue Jays out. So I think if you look at the Blue Jays as being a constant in that top 2 or 3, the Orioles, whose prospects I love, by the way, if you actually take a deep look at their system, it's so deep. And then you look at Tampa Bay, who I think did a pretty good job rebuilding. It's tough, man. Like the Yankees, I really like. I don't know that Brett has a future year unless he goes all in one way or the other. He's kind of in that like halfway rebuilding mode. He's already out there publicly trying to buy a starting pitcher in last place in the American League East. Like, is that the right move for an American League East team that's in the bottom half? I don't know. He shouldn't be in an Allard. He shouldn't be trying to go out and buy a guy like John Bauer, or Trevor Bauer, excuse me. He wasn't, but still, he needs to be, in my opinion, selling pieces. But that's
not to sorry to interrupt you for 1 second. We have an injury that's worth noting tonight. Casey Kelly left his start for Seattle against Oakland in the 7th inning. We're going to have to wait and see what that injury's like. But a rotation in Seattle that I know is outside of the top 2 and Hooper, I guess top 3, Hooper, Bundy, and Holtzen, there has been some concern about with its depth. So a long-term injury to Casey Kelly could be a problem for the Seattle Mariners.
Some adversity. I love it.
Yeah. What else had you heard from GMs from? What other topics do people want to discuss tonight? We got about 5 minutes left before this timer gets the best of us.
Yeah, I want to talk Tigers, man. Like, we don't get a real deep look at the Tigers rebuild that often. Jim and his assistant GM Josh, the video game bandit, are barely hidden. I'd love to hear the Tigers' thoughts on where their rebuild is and where their plan is.
Well, let's start with this then. Let's start with this, Jim. You had the number 1 pick in the draft, Jason Dumont. Tell us about him.
Jason Dumont. So a lot of people had some other pitchers ahead of him. We had him as both the highest rated and the safest. So high floor and still a bunch of ceiling left on him too. Mainly a control guy, but still some decent stuff there too. So we really liked that pick. And we've been going offense the past couple of years with the number 1 pick. So it felt good to take an arm. We haven't really developed much in the minor league system thus far.
Anthony Chapman has had his debut here recently, a 2-0 start in the bigs. I know you had mentioned that Matthew Liberatore might not be far off. What's his timeline to reach the bigs? Is he going to be in AAA for a while?
Nope, it's going to be quick. I would say within a month. I might get more impatient. We'll see if Josh talks me out of it.
Are there any other high-end prospects along the ways to join the two of them in the bigs this year?
Some of our top prospects might pop up, but I don't think that they're anything more than big players. So Keston Hiura has really nice stats at AAA, but he still swings and misses quite a bit, and I have concerns about him in general. Rosa, we already promoted. That's a guy we got from Justin out in Seattle, who we love, and he looks like a fixture atop of the lineup. Venables, our number 1 pick from I can't remember if it was last year or the year before. He's struggling at AA. I really wanted to be able to push him to AAA, but it doesn't look like we can.
What's the first year in your mind that the Tigers win the Central? Where's your target?
2022.
Okay.
When all the money comes off the books, we can be players in free agency that year, like big players in free agency that year. And I think the talent starts to congeal a little bit around that time frame. 2022, 2023.
I hate free agency in this league. I hate it so much.
You hate what?
I hate free agency in this league. It's a nightmare. I can't.
Oh God, yeah. That's Jordan Miles.
Why the shit is Will Myers making $30 million? It's ridiculous. Anyway, unrelated. Yeah, buddy.
I'm curious if you guys have a take on the White Sox. That's a team that, like I said, I follow quite a bit. I feel like that pitching staff has a ton of potential and is never really performing. We seem to rake them pretty good every time we play as well.
It's an interesting pitching staff. Kyle Cody, and Brenton can speak on this because you spent some time in Atlanta, possesses terrific stuff, but it's never really translated onto the field yet. And will it? I think that there's question marks on that. Josh Johnson's a veteran getting up there in age. The guy that I think has been just tested to that bad luck this year, and I think some of it has to do with just the Eddie spoke of his atrocious defense. The Bill Black has just been blasted because just guys are making contact and finding open space. Last I checked, this was a team that had a defense that ranked basically near the bottom of the American League, and it's having an impact on all those starters.
He's also Black's faced some really tough offenses. I remember this and I just pulled it up real quick. Like he said Colorado and Los Angeles like back to back. So I know he's had some tough starts in there too.
Another team in that division that's had some pitchers face adversity, and I think lineup or schedule wise hasn't been favorable matchups has been Sean Stevens and Pineda in Cleveland. Ball's been flying out of the park off of both of their bats, but at the same time, Strasburg and Rod Swift are 13-0 last I saw. So things aren't terrible in Cleveland. What's your take with being a part of that division? Who last year we saw Cleveland get to a hot start, Minnesota chased them down. Cleveland's off to another terrific start, added Strasburg this offseason. Are they the team to beat? Is it Minnesota or can the White? Who's the favorite in your eyes in that division?
Man, whenever I look at when I look at those two teams and they are pretty equal, I still see Cleveland as the favorite. I love the front part of the pitching staff. I like most of the lineup. Those guys batter us pretty good every time we play. Minnesota, and like I apologize, Rocky. I can't actually remember if we've played that many games so far this year, but I just for whatever reason I'm just not as afraid of that team when we roll in there.
We are approaching we're under 5 minutes, so let's go some final thoughts. Jim, I got you here on screen. Do you have any final thoughts? Anything league related, Tiger related? What's the last word you have?
Final thoughts. Come bring some trade ideas to Josh. That guy loves to talk trade.
Josh, let's video games and trading. That's what Josh gets paid the big bucks for in Detroit. Scott, what are your final thoughts? What's coming next? What should we expect here in the next day, week, 2 weeks with the Cincinnati Reds?
Well, we'll see what kind of trade offers I get on everybody. That's major league piece because
the fire sale in Cincinnati, folks.
Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, hey, I won tonight.
You did win tonight. Eddie, final thoughts coming out of Colorado?
Well, Colorado just walked it off against the Giants, so that's cool. And then, hey, the Diamondbacks, they scare the shit out of me. That's a good damn team.
And with Jeffrey Stone still lurking in the wings.
Yeah, dude, it's like you just look at his AAA line. He's got I think over the next couple of years, they're good. They're a good team.
They are a very, very good team. Brenton, yep. Atlanta, final thoughts coming out of you? Anything that we need to touch on quickly here in the last 2 minutes?
No, final thoughts out of Atlanta are, hey, we are absolutely going to organize a Major League Pro, MLB Pro drinking night. We're gonna have a night. We're gonna play some games, folks. I don't care if it's board games or what it is. I'm gonna make it happen in a couple weeks here. I'm pumped about it. It's a good league. I really appreciate the participation tonight. It's been a fucking blast over the last couple weeks, and quarantine sucks.
Quarantine does suck. MLB Pro does make things better. Thank you guys for joining us. Eddie, as always, thanks for joining us. Scott, good to see you again. Brenton, thanks for seeing you. Jim, is this your first time Zooming with us?
First time, man, but I'm coming strong next time.
Yeah, you're stuck with us moving forward. So thank you for taking a part, and we'll be back here in a couple days to discuss the latest trade out of Cincinnati. Take care, guys.
See you guys.